The World Cup is such a magical competition that the difference between teams can sometimes vanish thanks to the selfless play of more modest teams that fight for the sake of their supporters like there is no tomorrow. Such matches are hardly a coincidence, but rather a fair outcome of a huge work. Goal24 presents you with the top 10 most surprising results in the history of the World Cups. But before we start, answer a question. Which player scored the most number of goals in the World Cup 2006? Luca Toni, Hernan Crespo, Peter Crouch, Cristiano Ronaldo? Write your answers in the comments, and we're starting right now. South Korea vs Italy 2002. This match went down in history as one of the most scandalous matches. These two teams faced each other in the round of 16, where Squadra Azzurra were the unconditional favorites. However, South Korea were the hosts of the tournament. Besides the supporters in the stands, the referee from Ecuador, Byron Moreno, was obviously helping the Asian team. At the beginning of the match, Italy opened the score with a header from Christian Vieri. Then they controlled the game and had the chance to win it even more comfortably. However, in the 88th minute, they were made to rue chances, as South Korea equalized and sent the game to the extra time. And during these 30 minutes, the ref obviously took the Korean side. First, he showed the second yellow card to Italy's forward Francesco Totti for diving in the opponent's penalty box. But the replay would hardly show you any simulation in the forward's actions. However, Italy were left a man down. A bit later, Damiano Tommasi scored what seemed to be the golden goal, but the linesman saw offside for some reason and disallowed the goal. By the end of the extra time, Ahn Jun-hwan scored the winner for Koreans and sent Giovanni Trapattoni's team home. This outcome has been one of the most surprising ones since the World Cup 2002. Germany vs Japan 2022. This World Cup has become the first large international tournament for the Bundesteam manager Hans-Dieter Flick, who used to be Joachim Löw's assistant when they won the World Cup in 2014. However, after two failures that followed, the German fans were approaching the Japan match in a good mood, expecting a confident victory. The start of the match was quite successful for Germany. At first, İlkay Gündoğan opened the score from the spot. At the end of the first half, Kai Havertz scored another goal, but he was disallowed because of an offside. Actually, the Germans weren't that bad in that match, but in the second half it all changed. It was a feeling that the German national team got tired after an hour of playing. The Japanese managed to turn the game around, and in a short period of time scored 2 goals against mighty Germans. This was just the beginning of the Bundesteam's fall. Germany vs Mexico 2018. Something similar happened to the Germans in the World Cup in Russia. They were the holding champions of the tournament. That's why the expectations from them were high. In the first match, Germany faced Mexico, a team with modest but very hard-working players. Surprisingly, the mighty Germans could not oppose very organized Mexicans, as they controlled the ball throughout the game. Irving Lozano's goal in the 35th minute decided the outcome of the match. Germany was unable to recover after that, and was sensationally relegated from the group, winning against Sweden and losing to South Korea in the last match day. Argentina vs Saudi Arabia 2022. The South Americans were approaching this World Cup as one of the favorites for the title and as the ruling champions on their continent. Nobody had any doubts in Argentina's victory in the first match against Saudi Arabia, because the Asian team obviously were weaker than their star opponents. In the beginning of the match, the Albiceleste captain Lionel Messi scored from the spot. Argentina scored a couple of more goals in the first half, but the ref didn't count them because of offside. As a result, Scaloni's team won the first half 1-0. But the beginning of the second half shocked the whole world of football. At first, Saudi Arabia equalized and then scored the second goal. After that, the Argentines were unable to recover, although the opponents didn't park the bus and defended quite high. The Arabs had only 3 shots on goals in that match, but that was more than enough to secure the victory. France vs Senegal 2002. The Germany national team of 2018 were not the first ruling world champions to get knocked out in the next World Cup group stage. In the 2002 World Cup in South Korea and Japan, France were the title holders and had players like Zidane, Henry and others. But right in the first match of the group stage, France sensationally lost to Senegal, a team that played in the World Cup for the first time. The only goal was scored in the 30th minute by the former Fulham midfielder Papa Bouba Diop. The French were unable to find a way to the opponent's goals and lost the game. By the way, Senegal's captain in that match was their current coach Aliou Cissé. Talking about France, they didn't manage to win a single game in that World Cup against Denmark and Uruguay, and as a result, they were knocked out from the last place in the group stage. Spain vs the Netherlands, Spain vs Chile, 2014. Spain had a similar situation in the World Cup in Brazil. Vicente Del Bosque's team were the reigning champions of Europe and the world. They had won the golden medals of 3 last large tournaments and were considered to be a real machine. Unfortunately, that system was ruined on the first match day of the group stage in Brazil, when Del Bosque's team faced Louis van Gaal's the Netherlands. Although Spain scored the opener thanks to Xabi Alonso's penalty kick, the Oranje turned the game around thanks to the header from Robin van Persie at the end of the first half. In the second half, Spain were a completely different team. The Netherlands dominated the game fully and humiliated the opponents 5-1. Van Persie and Robin scored 2 each, and 1 goal was scored by Stefan de Vrij. On the second match day, the Spanish did not play well either. This time they faced Chile, but Del Bosque's team were far from the level they had been demonstrating in the previous tournaments. Eventually, Spain lost 2-0 and got knocked out of the group stage. Germany vs Brazil, 2014. Probably the main sensation of the World Cup in Brazil was the semi-final match where the hosts got knocked out. One may say that a defeat on this stage is not really a sensation, even for the Pentacampeones. But the thing is how Luis Felipe Scolari's team ended their participation in the tournament. The Brazilians had shown quite a good game during the tournament, and we can't say that they deserved a defeat in the semi-final. The whole planet was expecting an equal and tense battle between the 5-time world champions and Germany, but shockingly, the game was over in the first half. By the 29th minute, the Germans had already been leading 5-0, ripping the opposition defense in all possible ways. In the second half, the Bundes team scored 2 more goals. Symbolically, Miroslav Klose's goal helped him beat Ronaldo in the World Cup top scorers race. However, that embarrassing match ended 7-1. The only prestige goal was scored by Oscar, but that didn't prevent the home team supporters from crying tons of tears. Costa Rica vs Uruguay, Costa Rica vs Italy, 2014. Although the current World Cup for Keylor Navas and his team started with a humiliating defeat from Spain 7-0, in the Brazilian World Cup they did way better than that. The Costa Ricans were in the group of death alongside England, Italy and Uruguay. Before the tournament, they had been considered the main underdogs of this group, but Jorge Luis Pinto's team turned out to be a real sensation. There were only 3 more or less famous players in the national team. It was Levante keeper Keylor Navas, as well as Arsenal's promising footballer Joel Campbell, and Brian Ruiz, who showed decent game for Fulham in the Premier League. In the first match of the group stage, Costa Rica conceded a goal from Uruguay. But then, this team shocked the whole planet, scoring 3 goals. At that moment, Uruguay forwards Luis Suarez and Edinson Cavani were in their prime. The same can be said about defender Diego Godin, but all these stars were unable to help their national team to gain at least 1 point. Costa Rica's dominance angered the Uruguayans so much that Maxi Pereira acted quite rude at the end of the match and was sent off. However, Jorge Luis Pinto's team did not stop there and proved that this victory was not an accident. In the second match, they created another sensation by beating Italy thanks to Brian Ruiz's goal. the Central American team managed to get to the quarterfinals in that World Cup and lost to the Netherlands only by the penalty shootout. Spain vs Russia 2018. The 2018 World Cup hosts played quite confidently in the group stage against such teams as Uruguay, Egypt and Saudi Arabia, winning 2 out of 3 matches. Many Russians thought their team would get knocked out in the first 16 stage when they learned that they had to face Spain. The beginning of the match was really not the best as Cherchesov's team scored an own goal in the 11th minute, giving the lead to the Spanish. But at the end of the first half, Russia were given a penalty and Artyom Dzyuba equalized from the spot. In the second half, the Russians defended quite well and moved the match to the extra time. 30 minutes later, the penalty shootout started. In the most important moment, goalkeeper Igor Akinfeev stepped up and saved the penalties by Koke and Iago Aspas, thus leading his team to the World Cup quarterfinals for the first time in history. Croatia vs Argentina 2018. Before the World Cup in Russia, Croatia had been considered a quite dangerous team that had very good players in the squad. However, the Croatians hadn't been able to perform well in big tournaments. That's why Zlatko Dalic's team was not taken very seriously in the World Cup 2018. But they were all wrong. And Croatia proved that in the second match of the group stage against Argentina. The first half was a goalless draw, but in the second half the Balkan team humiliated Messi and his teammates, scoring 3 goals. The gem of that game was Luka Modric's goal that completely dismantled the Argentines. Croatia reached the final in the World Cup where they were defeated by France 4-2. However, considering the difference of resources and levels of players, we can confidently say that Zlatko Dalic's team performed well above the expectations. There have been several sensations during this current World Cup, some of which we've already mentioned. And seeing the results of the knockout stage, we can say for sure that there are more surprising results to come. Dear friends, which of today's results surprised you the most? Let us know in the comments, we'll be happy to read them. See you soon.